We are creating the world we're now living in. We are competing in. We are repeating in. We are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.
So, welcome to Radio Intentional Decisions and the series we have now called Global Consciousness. And I'm very eager to have this conversation today together with Jens Rinnet here in the studio, because we have two very interesting guests in this dialogue. It's Will van Inwagen, and it's Tina Gatterman, and they are both engaged in something called Being in Systems. Welcome, Tina and Will. Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we have a theme for this dialogue, and we have a main question. Maybe we should just bring that on the table already from start and see what is emerging from there. And we formulated this question a couple of days ago, Will, you and I. And couldn't you help us out with it? Do you remember the question? It was the main question of the dialogue.
Yeah. How can we transform the workplace from a task processing machine to a collective collaboration filled with engaged human beings?
Yeah, so that brings a lot of questions, of course, on the table. Maybe we should take like a round on the table just to say hello to the audience and to each other. Just so everyone knows, I know Jens from beforehand. We have been working together for like 3 years or something. Mm-hmm. Mm. And Will, and we met, you and I and Jens, a couple of months ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Tina I met 3 days ago or something like that. So, but the two of you, you know each other from beforehand also. Couldn't you start out by telling us a little bit about what brought you together and why?
Thank you. Tina and I have worked together and been known each other for a while now. And we first got to know each other in a organization called Enlivening Edge that we worked with, and we both worked in that. And then later on, I had this dream of, because I do these community conversations and I meet amazing people from all over the world and work with them. So I said, all right, I want to work with this dream team. And Tina was one of them. So I invited a group of people together to see what we could co-create together. And what came out of it is Being in Systems. And the purpose of Being in Systems is, our purpose is to catalyze the awakening of individuals to their agency, their voice, their value, and their generative capacity in all aspects of their life. And so Tina and I have been working together quite a while, and I'll turn it over to Tina to fill in the other spots.
Yeah, thank you, Will, and welcome to everybody. Yeah, it has been some years, and what was the most, let's say, for me, loving part of it is this huge capacity in Enlivening Edge, and especially in Will, to have these connecting capacity. And this is already one of these maybe little seeds we are going to be talking about. This is these reaching out and connecting people, and how to open people up to more connectivity. And Will, when he invited us about like 1.5 years ago, he just did this. He followed his inner dream, vision, and just opened up a space without having the intention of the outcome of what should, let's say, come out. And we all were just like arriving, appreciated, and feeling welcomed, and we're just sharing. And out of this, we of course shared our gifts, our visions, our desires, and then we saw the synergies. And this is really, yeah, which finally brought us also here.
Yeah, it sounds pretty much like when we met a couple of years ago, Jens. And of course, at some level, you need to get to know each other. But I'm thinking sometimes that maybe we are like, maybe we should try out when we're talking about what happens at work. Maybe we should just do stuff. I don't know what you say, Jens. We have talked a lot of this during the last years, that sometimes we're stuck in dialogues or conversations and we never get forward. I don't know how you experience this. Maybe you can elaborate on that, Jens.
Yeah, I think that's one way forward. And I mean, as you said, there's a certain value in getting to know people on a personal level. But I think there's also tremendous value in experimenting together and getting to know each other through work, through the process of creation and, yeah, doing something together, being together in a space, and, yeah, engaging in the emergence of the process.
Yeah, and to be honest to the audience here, I would say this is why we want to do this together, all four of us, because we believe that there is something that is both wanting to emerge, but also some kind of an intent that we set when we create stuff together. And of course, we could have this dialogue without anyone listening more than the four of us, but that would be a pity, I guess. There is a lot of knowledge in what you do, Will and Tina, and hopefully we can share it with the audience, and also an invite for more people to engage. Isn't that a great thing to say already from start?
Oh, I love that. Is that it's not us, we're not doing everything. And there's the whole thing, is that, and our emphasis in Being in Systems is about beingness. And we are so caught up in the world of do. And so I really love that invitation to the audience and to others that how do we collaborate together? Because with the enormity of what's going on in our world, it's going to take a lot of us to come together. And that's, folks, why I originally contacted Jens and Stellan, is because I find it amazing what you folks are doing with Emprogage in, Sweden and your area up there. And so I wanted to, wow, what are you folks doing and how can we play together? And I invite other people, to contact us, to contact you, and to see that. To me, is it what can emerge out of this collaboration. It'll be awesome.
Tina, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just listening to Jens, and I love the contemplation around doing and being, because I feel this not to be an either or, but maybe it's more the question on where are you centered in? You know, and also being, we could also share a little bit about more what being means, because of course we all are in the sense of being, but what do we expect if there's more being in an organization, and what can this unfold? And maybe from this centering in the being, then the doing becomes something totally different. And this is what we have sometimes just named like inspired action. So I would also be curious on what you both say, what being would be for you, and then maybe Will and me, we could also share what makes the difference, so that we become more specific around that, to be understood.
Yeah, I love that. Do you want to start? You probably have some thoughts on that. I know Jens, so he always have like something that is not only reflective but also creative.
Yeah, interestingly, it's not really a thought. It's more a feeling, because when the two of you are talking about being, and especially about being the transformation at work that we all can agree on is needed to some level, and I guess we also have the intent to contribute to, then I feel like there's a difference in the quality of what you're talking about. It is less driven from the top down, less, putting something on other people, more inviting, more, for me, and a better, how can I say that, a nicer feeling, a place that I would like to be part of more. And so that's the feeling I have about this space. And then what being then for me means is having a clear intention of, what I would like to experience, and then giving it enough space, so to say, inviting other people into that space, and seeing how the essence of my intent is unfolding, and not being limited to a specific outcome or like a specific result, or wanting it to manage into a certain direction, but more or less going with the flow of, hey, where's the energy of all this going right now? What is the next step we feel inspired to take right now, while being grounded in the trust of the intention, and believing it ultimately everything will unfold as it's meant to be, and expressing the intention that I set out.
Wow. Yeah. When I'm listening to you, Jens, it also, of course, touches upon a lot of stuff. But what I'm thinking of already as the word being, for me, it's something that is alive. It's some kind of a natural system, which is both setting intents and also emerging at the same time. It's definitely not dead. So there is some kind of a dynamic part of it, which is could of course be controlled, which we very often do, but it could also be trusted. And I like trust as a way of actually a way of engaging. And I believe that if I look at the other beings around me, when I use and engage in trust, trust is also something that is built upon and amplified. And if I go into nature, for instance, if I talk to my dog or whatever I do, I would say trust is always there. And so being and trust for me should go hand in hand. And if I control it, I limit it, and I more or less, maybe not kill it, but I cut the wings, so to say.
I think you cut off a lot of potential.
Yeah.
You know what, you two, I love you. It's amazing. This is why I started the Community Conversations Living Edge 5 years ago. It's just when you get folks like you and energy together, and thank you, Jens. It comes from the heart. And Stellan, you brought up a really great point. Is that we have and are living in a living systems, and that's been the issue in the with organizations. They've tried to make it very mechanistic, and to quantify, separate it, to control it. And living systems, you can't. And I appreciate what you say about nature, because nature is the ultimate living systems, and that's what I feel that we're about, is how to move ourselves at some point in time into a more living systems manner. And that's what one of the amazing benefits that Tina has brought is her elemental approach to all of this, that maybe later on, we could go into a little bit about. So thank you for...
I would love that. So how do you look at being, Tina?
Yeah, I would like to come back to something what you have just shared, because I feel it to be just essential. And it's also essential in being in system, which is the trust. And when we now unpack the word trust, or what this enables us to do when we enter the space of trust between all that are present, is that we can really unfold the generative collaboration, meaning trust includes that tension and tickles are allowed. What can tickles and tension create? It creates diversity, friction, but by allowing them to show up in a place or in a space of trust, they enrich the space enormously. And I'm sure we all know, let's say, how often in let's say, traditional organization, things are simply not said and not shared just to avoid tension and triggers. Oh, and because you think you are not allowed to share or to say or to make a difference. And then you limit the potential. And Jens, you were talking about the potential that can be unfolded. This allows that non-judgmentally, everything need to be allowed within that space. And this is what you can, of course, or which you invite with trust to be there. Then you are also being, in a sense of how I understand it, is this being more complete, and until organization you say more whole. So you allow everything to be there first of all, and you come from that place, being whole, being accepted, and then also come with critical things, because every change, every new adaptation, and every agile situation, and we all need to be very agile in these times, requires to be also sometimes coming from intentional doubting, questioning, or whatever frame, but being allowed to be there. And this is what trust allows us to do.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of when speaking about trust, another interesting word connected to this, because I believe there is some kind of maybe not opposition, but maybe some kind of a trick we need to come around, and that's the word quality. Quality assurance. Quality assurance is something very often used in organizations and different types of production or whatever it is. And it's not only mechanistic, but it's very controlling. It maybe shouldn't or could, maybe it's just the way we do it. It's not necessarily to be controlling. It could actually be more, supportive. You should actually have quality systems or quality assurance that is lifting people or lifting the organization instead of controlling it. But most systems I've seen in organization I've been working with are more or less controlling, something that you do afterwards to find the faults or the people that are like the ones that created the problem.
Yes. Maybe I can just go directly into that, because this is very close together. Why do you start to control? You usually start to control because you have a kind of goal, and you have a kind of, how can I say, fear not to reach or to come to a certain point or quality or whatever. So quality generally is highly important. But if you come from the inner understanding that everybody involved gives its best, or her best, or his best, whatever, to that specific moment of time, and you just try to not control, but to look at it, to enrich it, and to make it to a better, or to improve it, it has another energy. And actually, I must say something now, which is not really maybe asked for, but I worked with Swedish companies for years. And what I have learned from Swedish people, especially compared to German people, is that they give you a kind of high level of trust. I have rarely been controlled. And maybe this is, let's say, something which is not in all Swedish company. I don't want to say predict that. But I have experiences was really that even when things happen, they were not blaming. And this not blaming is also part of how do you do about when something is critically wrong or does not match up to the quality? How do you go about it? And when you do not create an area of fear, but you come from trust, it can also protect.
You could definitely have organizations with blame culture. So I've seen them, and it's it really cuts away all potential, more or less. But what I'm also thinking of is the structure, the quality assurance structure, not only the culture, even if the wording's culture beats structure, even if that's true, I guess, I would say there is even a problem with the setups. So we have to, when we're talking about bringing more life into an organization, I guess for me it's a lot about bringing in trust and letting go of the controlling factor or the controlling systems, or maybe it's I don't know, because I believe what you say in the start here, Will, with the mechanistical worldview and so on. I've dug into it a lot, but I also think that there is like the other side of it. Even if you have a mechanistic structure, you can bring in life with a lot of trust. We've seen it in the agile setups with the project management and so on. Even if we use word as management, it's still open for people to create.
Okay. I'd like to dive into that because, as we said earlier, I love this. It's not this or that, it's both and. And it's not a matter of, it's yin yang, both, you need both of them. And what has happened, though, is that in our past, we have been overly dominant on the structural aspect. That's what I call the masculine side. And what Jens brought up was the heart. And I look at that as the divine feminine. And that's why we need both. Yet we've had such a predominance of the structure, the imposition, this is the way we're going to do it, when a lot of this is that when we come from the heart and listen to our intuition, listen to our gut, then both sides are working together, not in opposition to each other. So that's where I feel that, we're moving towards, is that we're both masculine and feminine. We're both of everything.
I love what you're saying, because for me, it brings also the quality of some what was mentioned earlier, is like there is no inherently bad or good structure or inherently good or bad culture. I mean, if you go with trust, and if you have a space of trust, everything is welcome. And it's more a matter of what is it that wants to emerge right now, or what is the intent that wants to unfold, and what is a suitable structure to use here. And I think there's a different quality in what you named as, taking inspired action, creating a structure that is supportive with the intent, and supportive with the potential that we are currently seeing, instead of already implementing a structure from the beginning, or being limited to only one structure that we know.
Yeah, and also the level of engagement. If you want people to be engaged, which a lot of organizations really want, then you also have to not only allow it, but also embrace it and nurture it and welcome it. I love that, Jens. I'm thinking of when we're talking about the divine feminine and so on. Right now we're sitting here having a conversation of course we are still in the Western world, but we are on both sides of the globe. Will, you're in US somewhere. Where are you right now?
Olympia, Washington, on the West Coast.
Yeah, and the three of us are in Europe. You, Tina, are in Germany, and me and Jens in south of Sweden. So of course there is like differences. I will say there will always be differences. But the interesting thing is that I believe that there is like more difference between us as two persons than there are between what we very often call culture. Connected to a country and so on. But of course, again, Tina, there is some kind of at least that's my picture also, that maybe German companies are, and you, the two of you, because you're from Germany also, Jens, and you, Tina, you live there. And of course you have a more knowledge than me in this, but I see where you're going at there is like a more, maybe, I don't know what the word is, but collaborative sense in Scandinavia. I don't know. Could be.
I think there's a little bit more freedom in personal space, but also in personal autonomy.
Yeah, but that's not connected to trust always. It's actually part of the system in some sense. So again, this is what I would like us to elaborate a little bit on. I really love the way you put it, Jens, where you have organization or the way to organize at the same level of need or want of engagement. Or I would say if you have a very open, free structure, for instance, a co-creative structure, which is also a structure. A lot of people don't believe that today, that co-creation is a structure. But if you don't have that structure, and people don't know how to fit into it, or even if it's there and you don't understand it, then you're probably not able to co-create. So then there is like a shift in this direction, and then we can have the opposite. You want to be engaged, but you're not allowed. So there is like a gap in that direction. I can't say which is best of those. I guess both gaps are in some sense problematic. What are your experiences on gaps like that? What do you say?
I would like, I have a question actually for Jens, but which goes also in answering what you were asking. So my question is that I hold is when we want to bring emergence into our center, this is what I understood from Jens' last contemplation, and this is also what BIS is doing. So to bring emergence into our center, and then also together with emergent, because this is kind of where we come from, the present moment. So to come from the present moment where emergence is burst, you could say. How much structure or what kind of structure is helpful and supportive to let emergence to happen? So sometimes Will, when I listened to Will over the last years, it was this container building, he's named that sometimes. So it's this conscious creation of a container or a space in this time, in this moment, to create this container for emergence, to allow that to happen. This is what I maybe ask also Will to go a little bit more deeper into it, because this is also what BIS is doing and trying and learning to do. And yeah, maybe Will, you want to go more into it?
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And we mentioned intention here way in the beginning, and you set an intention, and what happens is that when the intention is set, the dream, the idea is there, then it needs to be placed into this receptacle, and birth is such a great metaphor for this, is that you have this beautiful receptacle container to hold the birthing of a child, and it gives, and it's malleable, and it's nourishing, and that's what I call container building, is that we put our love in there and our intention, and that is the environment in which the seed, let's call it, will sprout. And I love gardening. And so what really makes a difference in gardening is the building of the soil. And when that is there, it's that, you build that soil, and then the thrivability of that seed is so enhanced. But then again, it's like, let's take, it grows, then like say peas, they need some sort of structure to start climbing. And so it all emerges as it grows, it emerges as a child grows. They need a lot of support at the beginning. And then as you know what happens when they get into adolescence. They think they can do it all on their own. And so emergence is just being, like Tina said, in the present moment, but, allowing that balance between, too much, too little. And guess what? The universe and people and things will tell you exactly, what you need, what kind of structure is needed.
I like the metaphor here. I like both of them, both the child birth and so on. But I would say we tend to see that environment is already set. But today we know that the thoughts of the parents, the way they treat each other, the environment they are in, and so on, really affects the fetus and the little child. And I guess that most people maybe can then relate better actually to the gardening metaphor. The problem with the gardening metaphor is that there is a gardener, and again, controlling. That's what we all very often do in the gardening. But I love the one with the seed and the soil, because again, if you put a seed, even if you're not going to garden it, you still decide upon what soil you put that seed in, and that's also not intent. Even if the intent is the seed, the choice of the soil is also an intent.
Mm-hmm.
And that is maybe clearer today when we have the epigenetics and stuff like that, talking about that. Okay, it's during the, what do you call it, child, when the woman has the child within her and so on, and also the genes themselves, they are affected by our thoughts, emotions, and the surroundings we are living in. And I mean, 20 years ago, this was like science fiction or story. Yeah, what do you call it? Just some kind of it wasn't for real, but it's really real today. So
I love that. I love that, Stellan. But that's what makes our world so diverse. Is that, okay, I like peas or this or that. Somebody might like artichokes or whatever. Is that there's such a rich diversity. I feel what happens is that, there's that competition and all these other factors that come in. There's enough abundance in this world to have our own particular kind of garden. But that's what makes it so rich, is that when all of the various plants start going together, and the science now of what goes on underneath the soil, and how each plant, tree, or whatever supports every other. And that's the thing, is that to remember from the micro to the macro that, yeah, I may have my own garden bed, but if I get somebody up, my next door neighbor, spraying with Roundup and the glucophosphates, it's going to affect my garden. And so that's what I'm trying to bring out here, is that each person can have their own, whatever they love. And then at the same time, we're all connected. And this is what we're seeing on a global planetary level of how something that happens in China can affect the entire world.
Yeah, and also I would like to add to it, there is, of course, an intent in that specific garden, but this is not the gardener who sets it. It is the purpose of that organization. So it's not an individual hierarchy-oriented whatever decision which is run, but it is coming from the collective. So now it depends on which, let's say, kind of structure we are talking to. We can maybe become a little bit more precise, but I can just give an example. In BIS, for example, we are 5. So now we have our purpose, and we have defined the so-called center of gravity. These are things which you have just said, which is our DNA. So, and everything that we put in our so-called garden, you could say so, is asked if it follows to the well-being of BIS to be able to follow its purpose based on the center of gravity. So there is a high guidance, but the guidance is not coming from an individual person, hierarchy, or whatever it comes from.
That's interesting. We have a similar system, I would say, in Emprogage. We call it guiding principles, and I really like that also, because it's like more like a guidance. It's some sense of again, when you set an intent, you have to, not at some level at least, relate to those guiding principles, or in your case, the what do you call it, the purpose and the gravitation.
Center of gravity, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, sometimes your individual idea or hope or wish has to be put aside for the well-being of that organization, in our sense, for the well-being of BIS. And this is something that, let's say, it changed, of course. Your individuality is still important, yet it is connected into the whole, because otherwise you would not be able to work from the present and from the space and from the field. So there is this conscious step from the individual action to the so-called in service to collective action. Otherwise, these, let's say, formats around emergence, etc., for my understanding, would not be able to live and to have an orientation. This is what we need. It's more orientation than decision that we need.
You're really, sorry, Will, you go first.
Yeah, thank you. This is where we struggle, is that, and this is what's happened in organization. The bottom line is about making money. And what we're moving towards in Emprogage and other organizations is that towards, what benefits us as a whole planet. We've seen exactly what happens when we're so concerned for our own bottom line, our own, what's good for our own company, and we don't involve anything else. And that's what I feel is the heart of all of this, is that the individual company or the person, I don't go away. And I'll be right up front with you, is that sometimes is that there's been things brought up when being in systems, is that, I personally doesn't really set well with me, but, it's to remove myself and then think of something larger and great, larger than me. Does it benefit the whole? And this is something where we don't have a lot of capacity for, and it goes back to what we started with in trust. And this is one of the fundamental capacities. There's a certain capacity that is needed to work in language and metaphor language of the spiral dynamics, is that we're shifting into a different era, and there's certain capacities that are needed in order to engage work within a different paradigm. And this is what we're being systems helps, is to how do we develop these capacities so that we can work in organizations that are living systems and that have a more conscious orientation to them.
It's very interesting. I want to share something with you, because we have a live chat going on YouTube, and I follow it here. It's a guy here called Dog Brightbot. Hello, Dog. Dog. How do you pronounce that? Doug. Yeah. Okay. Hope it's right. He says something interesting here. He says, like, the current paradigm structures disable emergent flow more than facilitating it between the people comprising an organization. I guess that's spot on what we have been talking about for the last 10-15 minutes. And the question would then be, if we're going into the main question again, how can we then how can we facilitate it, and how can we not only allow it but also amplify it? And what are the? I mean, you're talking about their capacities. What are those capacities? And structure? What is this structure? Intent? What are those intents? And so on. Maybe we should elaborate on that? Because I guess we have a lot of ideas and experience and also frameworks for it.
Yeah, I think what we have been talking about right now seems to me like co-creation or participation is already like a guiding principle that needs to be there from the beginning. Why? Because if I'm thinking about an organization as like a system where some people have decided on some point, this is our strategy, this is the purpose, and then it's, it is already exclusive to the people who are not part of the organization or who are joining later on and now don't have the right, really the authority, the power structures preventing it to engage in a dialogue about what is this purpose for us now? Has it evolved? Is it something different than maybe the founder of the company has decided upon 20 years ago?
Okay, so some kind of an update structure.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be an ongoing dialogue about what is the sensed purpose of the group, and opening up this, and then therefore, being participatory in nature, so to say.
I believe that you're striking something interesting here. On the other side, because there is another side, and that is the main purpose of the goal or whatever people call it, what they are doing. I think a lot of organizations believe that every time you do those, we can call it processes for a while. I don't, in lack of better words, maybe you take away focus from the what's. What are you? I believe that this is really important to really have those in place. But I don't know, Will and Tina. I've seen a picture once talking about the first loop innovation or learning loops. For people who are not familiar with those, it's like what we do when we invent stuff. We can call it the what's. It says that every now and then, if you go one loop behind the second loop, maybe you do it every 10 times or whatever. You ask the question, how do we work, or how do we innovate, and so on. And every now and then you go one more loop to the whys, and that is what you're talking about. That what was the purpose from start? Maybe another 10, let's say out of 100. You go there to see why do we do this? How do we what is the purpose of it? And we realize that there is also a need for a new loop here. As we're talking about some kind of a shift or paradigm shift, and that is, okay, so what is the fundamental assumptions we have? And of course, we can't do this every day, but maybe it's time now to say, okay, what are the fundamental assumptions we have built not only the organization upon, but also the worldview we have? Is it okay you talked about the machine metaphor or the machine-like organizations, but to be really honest, it's just like scratching on the surface here, because there are so many fundamental assumptions that needs to be replaced or reinvented, or So
thank you. I really love that. And first of all, we have that tendency because we like stability, we like control, we like power over. And so we put these in so that, okay, we can have a little bit of fun, but then if it gets too, dicey out there, we're going to jump in and like parents do and, stop the kids from, having fun because they're concerned about their health and safety. So I feel that the more we deconstruct, because we are so over-constructed. So surrender, let go. But again, do you see this theme that we keep on going back to of trust? It's so huge. And that we have this goal in mind to make money. But what happens is that we're not, trusting the employees. And what being in systems does is that it comes in, and we call ourselves in the current mode an infectious agent. And so, we come in, but we infect people to their own power, their own sovereignty, their own ability to know that within this group person or within this team lies all the answers that are needed. You don't need consultants telling you what to do. You don't need a new plan. What is needed is the empowerment of the person so that they can know and accept their own sovereignty, their own wisdom, their own knowledge. Then, when through the conversations that we guide people through, they then begin to form a really strong bond and connection with each other. Connection is very important. And then from that is that when a team gets to see this, then other teams within the workplace get to start to see, wow, I want what they have. Wow, look at what they're doing. And then it's all done from within the organization. There's not some outward trying to manipulate or whatever. It comes as a natural emergent process from within the organization as they begin to trust themselves and each other, and that they are in this profession, this job, and they know what is needed, and to trust each other that we're all headed in the same direction and that we can count on each other.
Mm.
I really love that. And for me, that is actually the difference that I was, excuse me, describing in the beginning, the feeling that is different, because we so often come into organizations in a traditional approach, looking at how can we improve the capacities of a person, of a team, essentially of the organization as a whole. But what you're describing here is, it's not really about changing, improving, trying to bring in something which isn't there in a person or in a team, but strengthening the bond, the connection, the relationship between people, creating that container, that safe space. And out of that relation, new patterns emerge. People feel safe enough to express themselves, to what you describe as stepping into their, own powers and saying, hey, I actually have an idea on how to do this. How do you like that as a team? Can we test that? So, and then of course we can talk about what structures are helpful for this. But I think the quality here lies in creating a safe space, and the quality of that space lies in the relationship between people and not in improving the capacities of people or groups.
No, I definitely agree upon that. But when we talked about capacities here, I guess that what we are talking about is like not something that has to be developed or anything like that. More, it has to be valued. For instance, trust. If we value trust, then there is like a space for it. Or if we value that people engage in stuff or take responsibility or whatever, I think it's more like on that level. I don't know what you say, Tina, but I'm thinking of it more like the capacity is more like to value maybe new stuff or stuff that haven't been there.
Definitely, it's all what I've just heard. I'm just thrilled about, because this is exactly what it's about. But I also feel that there are some, maybe even coming back to that structural thing that could support that, because you always would need to bridge people. And the people come from where they have been the last, let's say, years, sometimes decades. And they have been also sometimes, let's say, been triggered by existential fears, by fears of losing their job. A lot of things you do not become engaged because you have fear of when you do something, it has maybe something. So meaning sometimes it requires, for example, when you start such a process and dialogues with companies, that all people who are involved are promised not to lose their job. Are promised that everything that you share within these talks is confidential. So this is what we mean by container building. It is more than just words. So sometimes you have also to ask the client, the organization, for specific setups and requirements to enable that to happen. So it is something to bridge. It's about safety. It was just said. So how can you create also that safety so that people really do not think that, okay, I'm judged, suddenly then it's shared, it shows up in some kind of documents later on in the HR department or whatever. So how can you create also this trust and safety? And sometimes this need to be supported by contracts, I must honestly say. So
yeah, definitely.
Let's say these harder stuff, but it is to enable emergence, to enable trust. So sometimes this is needed.
I'm really glad that you point this out, Tina, because very often, again, I believe when we're talking, for instance, if we use the word co-creation, a lot of people believe that that means that you don't have any structure. I would say you need a lot of structure, maybe more than what we are used to, because we're used to hierarchical structures. We're used to the pyramid. We're used to get orders from above, going down and top down, and so on. And to be able to co-create, you have to have really supportive structure. And I would say structure doesn't stand in opposition of culture. It has to be both again. And what we have had before, as you mentioned in the beginning of the program, Will, is that we have had an tip over for structure, the masculine forces, or and what we're doing here is not taking that away. What we do is that we add what was not seen or not valued before, the divine feminine, or whatever we call it, those capacities that are needed to be valued to even exist. Otherwise, we're stuck in structures. Structures is not the problem. The problem is that when it's the only thing, then there is a problem. So I really love that, Tina.
That's what.
It is the dance. It is always the dance between the two. The question rather is, sometimes you have to elaborate and dig into what each person means and understands, even between male and female. Sometimes need a little more unpacking on what you mean by that. Also divine feminine. But generally for me, for example, it is the dance between creativity, birthing, nurturing, which you want to say maybe this is so-called divine feminine, coming from the, let's say, coming from the really creational power, yet, you know, we need the structure. We need somebody who takes care of that too. It is this embracing the creativity, and this embracing is so-called the structural or male. I would more call it the holding. It is the capacity to allow creation to happen, which is a super needed and positive male aspect. So it is this, it is this holding, and within that you allow creation to happen. This is for me the dance.
Yeah, I really like this, the dance. And what I'm thinking of is that if people listen or watch this and we don't really understand what we're talking about, we can use different words for a while. And one way to put it is that we have valued what can be measured. And we have said that that is the only thing that is real. So to be able to have something being real, it has to be measured in time and space. So what we are suggesting here is that there is something which can't be measured that is as important as what can be measured, and they have to be valued both. That is what we are talking about here. So for someone thinking of what can that be, then one way of putting it is structure and culture. But I would say it's even more than what we previously known as culture. It's there are more layers of it than we usually denominate as culture. It could be, maybe we lose someone if I call it spiritual, but don't get stuck on the word itself. It's more like that there is like a soul of any being, if we use that word, and that being could be a person, it could be an organization, and it could be a society.
Thank you.
So we don't, So if you follow this now and you're interested in how can this be done and so on, and what does it really mean, don't get stuck on the words. There are different words, and throughout history we have had this. We can call it capacity for a while, but we have valued it more. Let's say in the Western world, maybe 300, 400, 500 years ago, it was more of a non-separated world.
I really like that you're bringing that up, because I think a layer of that is, and then related to that maybe, is also complexity. You know, the structures that we had so far, or the things that we have valued over dominantly in the last, I guess, only 200 years, is they are already pre-directing. How can I say it? Like, it's the direction is already set from the beginning. There's very low complexity involved. It is like, I have this goal. Exactly. Reductionism. I have this goal. This is what I measure, the KPIs. So I'm only allowed basically in this one direction where the goal and the KPIs are leading me. But when we are talking about innovation, for example, as a concrete field of application, you need to have this safe space where people can play with ideas, express themselves, and the complexity is so tremendous because people are throwing ideas out into the space, into a room, on a whiteboard, wherever, and nobody knows really from the beginning what is the best. And you don't measure it in the moment somebody said it, like, oh, this is good or this is bad. No, it's just all welcome from the beginning. You first let it out, and afterwards you kind of use the frames like strategy, what's the purpose of the organization, to decide, well, what makes most sense for this team, for this organization right now to pursue. What are good options to look into?
Then the frames aren't limiting. It's more like enablers. And one way to if you just mention complexity here, if anyone listening or watching again, if you want to dig into complexity, there is a lot of work done in the last maybe 10, 15 years on this in different studies and so on. And one way to go forward instead of reductionism, instead of reducing this system to being simple, is to keep the complexity and maybe embrace the complexity. And instead of reducing it to simple systems, using simple or heuristic principles or guiding principles to both navigate and create in that system. That means that it could be looking like it's really messy, but as long as you go for what you have set, for instance, one step before the other, then you're moving in a direction. So I really like that, Jens. I'm thinking here of what is then, let's say now we have elaborated a little bit about those capacities. I would say trust is one, another one is empathy. And empathy is quite close to love in some sense, or something that is at least interested in knowing something more. There is like a moving direction in it. So the next step, I would say, would then be for having such an organization or such an environment, I would say you have to see yourself as being in that environment or part of it and a co-creator of it. I don't know how you use this way of working in being a systems, but I would say, if I come into an organization as a consultant, say, and I'm looking at myself as an objective observer, I'm lost. But if I go in as a co-creator and take responsibility for not only my own work, but for the collective work, then that could be like, it could be magic.
Go ahead, Tina.
I was just now curious, actually, what you want to bring to it.
Oh, sure. That's it. Yeah. As soon as you separate yourself from it, and it's really interesting because it's a co-creative, collaborative endeavor. Is it? We're not telling the organization what to do. What is the issue? What is the subject? What is the event that wants to be co-created with all of you? Then you sit down, and then basically you're going through the steps of creating a container. All right, this is what we would like to see happen. This is a general idea. We want to work towards this. And then all parties are come into agreement around that. And then once that is developed, then you bring in the rest of the pieces of you basically, again, goes back to container building. You create the container in which will optimally nourish and flourish whatever it is that you want. But what happens is that where the individuals then get to have a say. And what Tina said earlier on is very important, to know that, this is okay. I can speak ideas that may not be with company policy or whatever. It just gives the team free range to be able to get to know each other. So there's a system to it, but each person, each client, and I don't like the term client, each organization or team we're working with it's unique. It's like tomatoes are different, potatoes are different. It's you take whatever is needed at that moment, and then what emerges from that, you build on it. And there's also that feedback loop. Are we just spending too much time talking, and are we moving ahead to where we want to go? So there's a lot of multiple layers and dynamics that happen from the initial engagement to where you finally see what's going on. And then what's really important is that it doesn't just come to an end, that it becomes a generative emergent process that goes into the rest of maybe other teams or into the organization itself.
That was what you spoke of before, Jens.
Yeah.
Having such a regenerative, I don't know what we can use for word here, but process is, I can go for process. It's a little bit more alive than a machine, but it's still in that direction. So maybe we could find new words for stuff also. I realized here you mentioned new words, and I would say this is I wouldn't say a problem, but this is something we need to sort out, to find new ways of talking about organizations, new ways of talking about life. Instead of as a puzzle, I like, for instance, Lego instead of a puzzle and so on. And
I got a question for you, Stellan.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, it's interesting. We automatically go back to, well, what can we label? What can we talk?
Yeah, I know.
And the thing to me is that how can we descend into the language of feelings? And feelings are vibrations, feelings are energy. And I've been on so many calls that you can, with people all around the world, and you can palpably feel a shift in energy.
Yeah.
And so we tend to be mentally dominant. And so I feel the shift in language is the language of our heart.
Yeah, I like that analogy. And what I'm thinking of is not the labeling in sense of labeling and sorting. It's more like in nominating stuff, because for me at least, I would say having words making me able to create. That means that if I have a word, I can create that, whatever it is. I have some kind of a picture or feeling of it. You don't agree here, Tina, but what I'm thinking of is, yeah, of course you can always have like a feeling of something. But again, if we're stuck in the language of yesterday, it will be hard to live today and probably a struggle for tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I was just shaking the head, because sometimes when it is still, let's say, so-called in the space, in the potential, in the possible vision, you can even sometimes do not find words. And sometimes, let's say, it is like that you find it more like in feelings maybe, but even in colors or in other things. And as it becomes more dense, and as you bring it down, let's say, and start to then try to manifest it, you can find words. But what we are trying to bring into it is also the intangible, non-describable, let's say, level, where it is around frequencies, where we sometimes just feel and sense even beyond, let's say, your talk, because the agility that is today needed is to go beyond the organizations, to feel into the society, into culture, into countries, into whatever, because the connectivity in the speed, and especially what comes with the electronical thing in the future, it will even speed more up. And we would need to expand to see what is going to happen. And this is only when we go higher, in the sense of even not being able to describe it by wording, but sensing it. And this is this frequency, this expansion. and then to see how you can, I mean, this is now spiritual, I do not want to go too far, but you know what I mean, because when, for example, what we all experience this year in February, coming with all of this huge wave, is what happened to the people, and then to not go small, not become smaller, but expand and to listen and to invite and to feel what is happening, and how can we act and react to that in a very fast and agile way.
I think we shouldn't be afraid too much of using the word spiritual in work, because I think when we're talking about being humans at work, we are human, spiritual beings. And, there's a spiritual aspect. And I think another word that I would use for describing the spiritual, it's nothing really religious, or it's something abstract, something so complex as you described, we don't necessarily have already a wording for. So it's something we need to listen into, feel into, because there is something that is larger than ourselves. I think today we live in a society where we, immediately see what's happening on the other side of the world, how our actions here affect people on the other side of the world. And that is something, you can almost feel that because it is so close to you nowadays through social media and all the technologies that we have. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a sense of how do my actions affect someone else around the world, and what is the feeling of that, and am I sensitive enough to take responsibility for it, and take.
I really like this, and what I'm thinking of is that it also affects myself, and we didn't believe that in just a half a year ago. I mean, up until February, I don't know how many organizations that I've been working with that didn't allow their employees to work from home. And today, I would say everyone in the whole world has an own experiences from working from home. And for me, as a consultant and an entrepreneur and so on, I would say I've never really separated it because I didn't want to do it. I wanted to have a life that was whole instead of separated. And right now, we have a lot of people having that experience that they didn't have in February or beginning of January, at least. So I believe that there is, like right now, perfect moment in time and space and in our feelings and in our spiritual beings for just go with the flow and amplify it.
Thank you. I so appreciate what you two just said. That's magnificent. It just makes my heart soar. And this is the opportunity that we get to step up to. There is that sense of urgency. We see what's going on. And that's why we reached out to you folks, is to build more collaboration with each other and to take those necessary steps. And thank you, Jens, for not apologizing for who we are. And, and as you said earlier, Stellan, to take our words lightly, what is at the heart of of what's going on here.
Thank you very much, Will. I would say, if I was thinking of maybe we should wrap up, but right now I believe you just did it. I don't know if we want to add something here. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm feeling complete, and Jens.
Yeah, it's just building on what was said in the last point is, for me, there's a sense of transcendence, transcending the words, the concepts that we're using, transcending the dominance of mental approaches. And I think that in itself is a spiritual practice. That in itself is esoteric, whatever you want to call it. But I think that is what is needed right now to, take a step back, look at what are we actually doing, how do we do it, and find new principles, find new fundamental assumptions that are aligned with life. And I think every time we talk about systems and concepts and then obviously we need to use words and framings to have some kind of language, to get our messages across. There is a sense of being kind of limited to the systemic approach. I mean, even if we talk about living systems, it is always narrowing things down, trying to conceptualize the complexity of our beings and of life in itself. And I think you mentioned it, Stellan, there is a sense of whatever I'm doing, whatever context I'm engaging with, whatever I'm focusing on, it is already creating. It is co-creating. I'm co-creating
as you go.
Yeah. I mean, we have co-created this session right now, and it is affecting me as much as whatever I'm saying is affecting you. And it's a dance of how do I sense, how do I feel into it.
And also anyone watching this, I mean, Doug he interacted. Of course, you're looking at this afterwards or following it in another, another time and space than we are in right now. It's like no problem at all, because then we can elaborate further on. So please comment in the comments or share it with people you know who has this maybe not even ideas, but some kind of an urgency or a need or a want or some kind of curiosity in bringing life into work or whatever we can call it. And Tina, do you want to say something more before we wrap up this dialogue?
I'm very grateful for this talk. This is what I want to say. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And
I'd like to add something there.
Yeah,
Stellan.
yes, please do so.
I'm going to shamelessly promote you and Jens. And so I would like you to telling the audience right now is that in January, Stellan,
2021, we should say. In January 2021. If anyone looks at this in the end of 2021, it could be good to know that it's in January 2021.
Yes. On January 7th, Stellan, Livening Edge will host Stellan to talk about Emperor Gage and his work and what goes on with there. Then also in February, we're going to feature Jens. And so Jens will be there. And so we would like you to stay tuned. And I just gave you some of that information. And if anybody wants to contact Tina or myself, my email is will@beanandsystems.com. And I have such great appreciation, thanks, and gratitude for what you folks are about and the opportunity for us to really get this conversation going and get these ideas out and see to where it's going to emerge.
Yeah. And Jens?
Yeah, thank you, Will. Then there has to be shame in that. As you said, you are an infectious agent. And I wish that you spread more of this quality of relationships around the world. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tina, and thank you, Will, and thank you everyone who have followed us both the live session on YouTube, and if you listen to this afterwards on the podcast, you can also engage. You can always make contact. It's not further away than an email or a telephone call. And please bring life into work, and so it's really work life for real. And what I'm doing now is that I'm going to mute myself, and we will start the jingle again that everything started with. So very soon, hopefully, we will see you again in a new episode of the podcast called Global Consciousness as part of Radio Intentional Decisions. So please